Good evening, everyone. My name is Cadogan, and I am an economic statistician with the Central Bank of Barbados. And it's my pleasure to present my research paper to you today, entitled From Data to Destination: Which Models Best Predict Barbados Tourism? This slide provides an overview of the presentation structure. I'll begin by discussing the motivation of the study, explaining what inspired the research and why it's important, and next I'll outline the research objectives, which define the main goals and questions the study set out to answer. And after that, I'll give a brief overview of the evolution of tourism demand forecasting, highlighting how forecasting methods have developed over time. Then I'll move on to the methodology, describing the models, data, and the techniques used. Following that, I'll present the forecasting results, comparing model performances before and after COVID-19. And finally, I'll summarize the key insights and conclude with a few policy recommendations that stem from the findings. Tourism forecasting plays a vital role in destination management. It enables better policy, planning, and investment decisions and helps countries anticipate shocks and sustain long-term growth. For Barbados, this is especially critical as tourism contributes over 11% to GDP, 12.6% to employment, and nearly 86% of foreign exchange earnings. Yet, despite this reliance, there's no national tourism forecasting framework. Forecasts are mainly produced by the central bank using simple short and medium-term methods, while for longer-term projections, there has been evidence of reliance on external models from the World Travel and Tourism Council and Oxford Economics, which aren't necessarily tailored to local conditions. This study aims to bridge that gap by comparing traditional, econometric, and AI-based forecasting models with the goal of providing policymakers and industry stakeholders with more accurate and resilient tools for anticipating tourism demand in Barbados. There are four main research objectives of this paper. First, to compare the predictive accuracy of time series, econometric, and artificial intelligence-based forecasting models using tourist arrivals data from Barbados. Second, to assess the impact of incorporating exogenous variables such as income and relative prices on model performance. Third, to identify the key strengths and limitations of each forecasting approach. And finally, to recommend the most suitable forecasting methodology for use by tourism stakeholders in Barbados, based on the findings of this paper. Based on the literature, tourism demand forecasting has evolved significantly over the past 6 decades, moving from simple rule-based techniques to advanced data-intensive models. In the early years, forecasting methods were dominated by simple time series techniques like naive models, exponential smoothing, and Box-Jenkins ARIMA, along with basic regression-based econometric models. A major review by Witt and Witt in 1995 found that no single model consistently outperformed others, and many econometric applications lacked key diagnostic and robust testing. In the early 2000s, there was a major shift towards dynamic modeling. Song and Lee in 2008 highlighted the adoption of models like the autoregressive distributed lab model, error correction model, and the vector autoregressive regression model, which better capture lag effects and econometric and economic dynamics. This period also saw the introduction of machine learning AI models, such as artificial neural networks and support vector machines, which showed high forecasting accuracy, but they lacked transparency. To address these trade-offs, the authors recommended hybrid models like SARIMA and combining the strengths of both time series and AI methods. In the most recent phase, forecasting methods have become more advanced with the adoption of deep learning techniques, such as long short-term memory and convolutional neural network. There has also been growing reliance on big data sources, including social media, search engine trends, and other forms of unstructured real time data. According to the authors, these tools have contributed to the current dominance of hybrid models. However, despite their accuracy, these modern approaches come with new challenges, namely data noise, privacy concerns, and the lack of theoretical grounding in many applications. As I said before, the literature generally classifies tourism forecasting models into three categories: the time series, econometric, and AI. And for this study, the most appropriate models were selected from each group to predict the tourist arrivals to Barbados. This slide outlines the specification for each model. Three time series models were applied: the seasonal naive model, which serves as a benchmark and represents the minimum level of forecasting performance. SARIMA, which is one of the more widely used time series forecasting models, which captures both seasonality and trends, and its advanced version, SARIMAX, which goes one step further by integrating external explanatory variables. From the econometric category, the ADML was selected and captures both short and long run relationships between arrivals and the external variables. Additionally, seasonal dominant variables were included, which are important for modeling tourism patterns in Barbados. This model is ideal for small samples and integration orders up to I1, which were characteristic of the Barbados arrivals data. Lastly, from the AI category, the support vector regression was implemented in both its univariate and multivariate form and optimized using a genetic algorithm to fine-tune its performance. The SVR was selected for its ability to model nonlinear relationships without overfitting. The models were applied to quarterly tourist arrivals from the US, UK, and Canada between 1976 and 2024. And this data was sourced from the Central Bank of Barbados and the Barbados Statistical Service. The explanatory variables were income, which was measured by real GDP per capita, and price, which is a relative price index combining Barbados's RPI, the source market's CPI, and the exchange rates between them. All the series were log transformed to stabilize variance and correct for non-stationarity. The data for these variables was sourced from the Central Bank, World Bank, and the IMF data portal. The models were trained and tested across two distinct timeframes using ex-post forecasting. The first period was the pre-COVID period from 2016 to 2019, which represents a stable environment with relatively predictable tourism patterns. While the post-COVID period now, that was from 2021 to 2024, it captures a more volatile recovery phase, allowing us to evaluate model performance under structural shocks. For evaluation, three core accuracy measures were used: RMSE, which penalizes large errors more heavily; the MAE, which captures the average error size; and the MAPE, which expresses error as a percentage of actual values. Additionally, relative RMSE was computed to benchmark each model's performance against a seasonal naive model, indicating how much better or worse each model performed in relative terms. All data transformations and model estimations were performed using the R statistical software. The results are presented here in table format with performance ranking listed next to each error metric. The last column contains the relative RMSE, where a value below 1 indicates better performance than the S-naive benchmark. During the pre-COVID period, the SVR univariate model had the best performance for both the USA and Canada, achieving the lowest error rates and outperforming all traditional models. For the UK, the SVR multivariate model had the best RMSE, although the seasonal naive model still led in the MAE and MAPE. Overall, the machine learning models were more accurate than traditional time series and econometric models in this stable forecasting environment. This graph illustrates how the top performing models tracked actual tourist arrivals before COVID for each country. For the US and Canada, the SVR univariate model closely mirrored actual arrivals, capturing both seasonal peaks and overall trends within narrow confidence bands, showing strong model stability. For the UK, the comparison between the two models there is quite interesting. The seasonal naive model appears relatively, well, visually closer to the actual arrivals in several quarters, but its wider confidence bands reveal higher forecast uncertainty.
Keeper, just tell us which of the panels is which.
Say that again?
Just say which of the panels is which, so we know what you're comparing as you
Oh, you
read.
can't. There.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
in the bottom two panels,
right.
I'm talking about the UK. So the first one at the top, that is the US. The second one at the top is Canada. And the bottom two are UK. Because I actually included both graphs for UK because both two models performed, there wasn't no one model that performed the highest in all three of the aerometrics. So if I could just repeat then for the UK, right, I mentioned that already. Uh,
Just repeat what you said
okay,
about
I'll just
these.
go over
Yeah.
the full slide. So for the US and Canada, the top two graphs, the SVR univariate model closely mirrored actual arrivals, capturing both seasonal peaks and the overall trends within narrow confidence bands, showing strong model stability. For the UK, which are the bottom two graphs, the comparison between those two models is quite interesting because the seasonal naive model appears virtually closer to the actual arrivals, which is the first one at the bottom, but it has wider confidence bands, revealing higher forecast uncertainty. And in contrast, as we are a multivariate model, the second one at the bottom, it shows a slighter, smoother line that doesn't follow every peak as tightly, but it maintains narrower confidence bands and lower overall errors. So while the naive model fits the short-term movements more closely, the SVR provided a more stable and statistically reliable forecast, which explains why it achieved the lowest RMSE overall. In the more volatile post-COVID period, across the board, error values were quite high, which reflects just how difficult it was to forecast tourism demand under those conditions. Rapid changes in travel behavior, ongoing policy shifts, and economic volatility made the task particularly complex for all models. That said, some models managed to handle these challenges better than others. The ADML and the SVR multivariate models consistently outperform the other models across all three countries. Their superior performance stems from their ability to incorporate external variables like income and price, which allow them to respond more effectively to sudden changes in demand. While CREMAX also incorporated external variables, its linear structure limited its flexibility. So it performed moderately well for the US and Canada, ranking third in both cases behind ADML and the SVR multivariate, but it was the worst performer for the UK overall. This suggests that the UK's tourism recovery was more heavily influenced by nonlinear dynamics or non-economic factors, elements that SVR and the lag-based structure of the ADML are better equipped to model. On the other hand, the seasonal naive and SVR univariate models struggle to cope with the complexity of the post-COVID environment, as reflected in their consistently higher RMSE and MAPE values. This underscores the importance of model adaptability and the inclusion of relevant external variables when forecasting in volatile and rapidly changing conditions. Again, this graph shows the top performing models in the post-COVID period for the US and Canada, which are the top, let me make sure. Yes, the US and Canada, the top one and the one to the to the left. Yes, The ADML model tracks the rebound in arrivals well, with most actual values staying within the wider confidence bands, a clear reflection of the uncertainty during this volatile period. And for the UK, the graph at the bottom, the SVR multivariate model closely follows a rapid rebound in 2022 and 2023, though the broader bands highlight the unpredictability of that recovery. Overall, these visuals reinforce the models that models incorporated income and price variables were more adaptable and realistic under the post-COVID instability. So this slide now summarizes the key insights from the study while addressing the research objectives that I outlined at the beginning of the presentation. First, we saw a clear shift in model performance. In the pre-COVID-19 period, the SVR univariate model outperformed all others. Its machine learning structure and nonlinear flexibility helped it to model the seasonal and trend dynamics of arrivals accurately. However, during the post-COVID period, this changed. The environment was volatile, and models like the ADML and the SVR multivariate stood out. These models performed better because they incorporated the external variables, which helped explain demand shifts triggered by the pandemic. When it comes to the exogenous variables, their value really depends on the environment. In stable conditions, their benefit is limited, but in disrupted or recovering markets, they're essential to improving forecasting accuracy. Lastly, each model has its strengths and trade-offs. SVR is powerful in capturing complex patterns, but needs external inputs when things become unpredictable. ADML is more interpretable and does well in economic shifts, though it may miss subtle nonlinearities. Serema and Serene Max work in simple settings, but can't handle shocks well. And while the seasonal naive model was competitive in some stable settings, it fell short during the volatile times. This comparison highlights the importance of tailoring model choice to the context and ensuring our forecasting tools can adapt to both stability and disruption. In conclusion, this slide outlines the key recommendations that flow directly from the study's findings that have practical relevance for tourism planning in Barbados. First, the result shows that no single model works best in all situations, so a mixed or ensemble forecasting approach is recommended that combines the strengths of different methods. This helps to reduce model-specific risks and improve prediction accuracy. Second, it may be time for Barbados to consider institutionalizing tourism forecasting. A dedicated national unit, perhaps within the central bank or Barbados Statistical Service, can provide regular long-term evidence-based predictions and guide timely policy interventions. Third, the performance of models with external variables during post-COVID period reinforces the need to improve data infrastructure. Collecting high-frequency aggregated data on prices, visitor spending, even online travel searches will make forecasting more responsive. And finally, these efforts must be supported by technical training. Training local analysts on AI models like SVR and tools like R and Python will help to build a sustainable forecasting system that's both modern and locally managed. By implementing these recommendations, Barbados will be even in an even better place to prepare to navigate both growth opportunities and future shocks in global tourism demand. This brings me to the This brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I welcome your feedback.
Thank you, Kiva, and now Robert.
Kiva, first of all, I would like to really give you my compliments on the topic and its importance. I feel it addresses an issue all or most Caribbean countries deal with. This study is crucial because it strengthens the evidence base for data-driven tourism policy by identifying the most accurate and context-appropriate model to forecast tourism. Your approach, I find it was methodical, it was clear, it was consistent throughout the paper. Your results suggest a clear and direct message to policyholders. And also your policy recommendations are very practical. So in the sense, I really liked the steps you took from, let's say, introducing the models and working up until the results and the recommendations. If I may provide some comments and or questions, in your paper, you used, in the absence of the CPI, you used the retail price index for Barbados. But given that the RPI is generally higher than the CPI, how do you feel using the RPI for the host economy versus the CPI for the source markets affect your results? Secondly, you use the income and the price as explanatory variables in your paper. Did you also consider using additional or alternative variables? In the sense, for example, airlift to the host economy, safety indicator for the host economy, maybe international oil prices or unemployment rates in the source markets, because especially unemployment rates and the safety indicator could be a measurement of a stable macroeconomic environment in the host economies. And also according to the...
Sorry, Robert,
Yes.
what's the second thing?
Unemployment and the safety indicator.
Safety indicator.
Safety indicator, yes. So, for example, how many crimes were committed
Okay.
per 100,000 inhabitants. So while I was reviewing your paper, I came across those variables. So I think maybe it's something to consider. Maybe adding them or alternating between them to just check the validity of the results. Another comment was that the paper is specifically designed on Barbados and focus on Barbados. But as an economist reading this paper, it would be interesting to better understand the economy and the trade linkages of Barbados, especially with the US, the UK, and Canada. So for example, in one of your slides and in the paper, you mentioned that tourism in Barbados accounted for 85.9% of foreign exchange and 12.6% of employment. So maybe include a short chapter with some graphs and some background, let's say, trade statistics between Barbados and the main source markets, so US, UK, and Canada. And finally, your study focused on Barbados, as I mentioned, but given that most Caribbean countries face somewhat similar issues, how do you think you can contextualize this study and its results with respect to other countries in the region? So those were my 4 comments and our questions. But to conclude, overall, it was a very interesting study comparing different models to predict the Barbados tourism from simple to more complex approaches. So overall, great job.
Thank you, Robert. Kiva?
Thank you, Robert, for your comments. I know my paper was very long, so I really appreciate you taking the time to read it and to provide your feedback. In relation to the relative price index, unfortunately, the CPI wasn't available for Barbados, so I had to use the next best indicator of prices in Barbados that was available, and that would have spanned the time frame that I had, the wide time frame from 1976 to 2024, which was the RPI. So that's why I would have used that information. I am not sure exactly what impact that would have on the results versus the CPI, as I didn't have the CPI data, but that's something, I don't know, I could probably see if it's something I can look into and see if I can, I guess, figure it out. In relation to the additional variables, so I started with the most, the most used or widely used variables first, which would be income and price across all of my research. You know, those are the basics for the predicting the tourism. So I made that point in the paper that I do want, like, another iteration of the paper could expand the variables. So I never thought of the safety indicator, so that is something, I don't know if you have the data, but I did want to expand the variables depending on data availability. So that is something I would look into for the next iteration. And thank you for the suggestion for the safety indicator. Um, the trade statistics. What was the question exactly for that one? I didn't grasp the full question. You said on the
It was,
trade statistics.
while I was reading the paper, it really focused on Barbados because that's also the topic at hand. But just to get more background information on the importance of the three social markets in, let's say, in the whole economy of Barbados.
Okay, okay. Okay, that's interesting. That's something you can look at. I would have selected those three, obviously, because I don't think I included it in the presentation, but the
If I
three.
may,
Oh, sorry.
Kiva, I think what Robert is saying is that you're assuming that people understand the importance of tourism in Barbados.
Correct.
And, what are our main sources of tourism. And you shouldn't assume that. That's the context that you need to provide. The fact that the Barbados economy is a tourism-based economy. You have to, it doesn't have to be long, but, you have to provide context.
Correct.
For the
Yes.
general.
Context. Okay, thank you. I would definitely look into that as well. And the final point, I was also looking at the possibility of expanding the research into including other countries within the Caribbean.
Sorry, again, if I may, Kiva, I think what Robert is saying is that you need to put Barbados in the context of the Caribbean, right? So we have tourism-based economies, we have oil-based economies, so that just, so we're talking about general background for people who don't have the
Oh, the background.
Yeah.
the information that you and I have.
Okay, that's something I could add then.
Yeah.
I think, Robert, those are very valuable comments. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so the floor is open for comments on Kiva's very comprehensive paper. And they have to be comments. You mean it was that good? It's either that the paper was that good or that nobody understands tourism in the region. So Kiva, let me say that I like the paper very much, even though I don't agree with any of its conclusions. No, seriously. It is very, very comprehensive, and very well set out. I think that you've done a good job in looking at all the alternatives and carefully evaluating them and presenting the results. I mean, it's really very thorough. And I think you should think of submitting it for publication as well. Having said that, though, the question I have for you is, would, and I deliberately put the question because I have another suggestion, but I will leave that until the end. Does Barbados' tourism really depend on the performance of the source markets? We get, what, 500,000, 600,000 long-stay tourists every year, right? And we could get that demand, we could secure from three major cities in North America and the UK, irrespective of whether the UK, the income of the source countries go up and down, or the prices, relative prices, whatever, so long as we price the tourist product according to the market that we want to secure. So why would the income variable or any other indicator of income or prices, relative prices in those countries matter?
Well, the literature did mention, well, specific to Barbados, that the price variable it was not significantly, what should I say, statistically significant in terms of let me start over. There is literature for specific to Barbados that shows that the price variable, that this was not a strong indicator for the tourist arrivals, for the performance of the tourist arrivals. So it seems as if the tourists' preference, as opposed to the price of the market, was more important to determining where, if the tourists would choose Barbados as a destination. But however, I chose the price because those were the two basic indicators that were used across most of the literature. So I just wanted to start there. I don't know where my next iteration will go, but I did note that price was not seen as a statistically significant indicator for Barbados in the literature.
What about income?
That one was significantly, yes, important, significant.
Okay, so this is going to be oh, we're done. Is the session, does that mean the session is over? Did you give me my extra 5 minutes? You did not. Okay. Anyhow, so with that, so just let me, since I didn't get my extra 5 minutes, it's only 3 minutes, it's only 2 minutes after three. Let me say that, as I say, I think that this is a very nice paper. I think it is a publishable paper, and I think that you should think of submitting it. But I think that for a practical point of view, in terms of tourism policy, I think that an alternative approach, which actually is much more at a micro level, so you break down each of your markets into specific regions. In fact, I would suggest breaking it down into municipalities so that you identify, because your ID cards tell you where people are coming from. So you identify your source markets by as finely as possible. And then you evaluate them according to income levels. You target the high income in Barbados' case, and you provide an appropriate, and you match the product offering that you have in Barbados to the income level that you target. And I think that that micro approach is going to prove to be much more practical and much more implementable, and it won't require you to establish a forecasting unit, which is going to be something that nobody can afford anyway. So with that, I will bring this particular discussion of this particular paper to an end, and we move on to